Hi everyone, it's Lynnea for LDRS Creative, and I have a really fun project to share with you today that mixes a few LDRS Creative products from the new Good Cheer collection that aren't necessarily made to go together, but I wanted to show you how easy it is to combine products. So I have here the Puzzle Frames stamp set, and this is a large 6x8 stamp set. It has this large puzzle grid, and then there's additional pieces at the bottom. It is meant to go with the Christmas Puzzle Scenes stamp set. And here's an example card that I made where I stamped that large puzzle outline, and then I used all of these elements, or some of them actually, there's way too many to use all of them on one card, but I used some of them and filled in the blocks. You can see the images have lines that are cut off, and that is designed intentionally so that they can fit perfectly inside of the outline of the frame. Now, like I said, there's these extra pieces at the bottom, and that is so you can build your own puzzle. So let's say, for example, you wanted to start with the rectangle, and then you wanted to take this curved semicircle and place one on the top, maybe 2 squares below, or even another semicircle underneath. You can build your own puzzle scene. In addition, some of these little pieces will fit inside of that large puzzle frame. So if you wanted to add one of the semicircle scenes, all you would do is take this semicircle that is kind of cut off in places and stamp that inside of that large puzzle frame, and then you stamp your scene right inside and you're good to go. So that's how this Christmas puzzle frame set is intended to be used. But I was talking with Angie, the head of LDRS Creative, and she was saying how fun it would be to use other stamp sets with this puzzle frame. So I grabbed the Sweet Magnolias stamps, and I'm going to use them inside of the Christmas puzzle frame set to create a kind of like a stained glass look. So let's go ahead and get started. I have an A2 piece of white cardstock. I'm going to take that puzzle frame, that large puzzle piece, and stamp that in the center of this card. Now, originally I was stamping in the center, and I did some masking because I thought it would create an easy one-layer card, and I abandoned that in the end, but for now we're going to go with the idea of creating a one-layer card. I am prepping this paper with my anti-static powder tool because I am going to be using stencils, and whenever I'm stenciling over stamps, I like to heat emboss to trap that outline ink to ensure it doesn't smear. So I'm stamping that Christmas puzzle frame, and that's it for this. It's just one large stamp. And then I'm going to do a bit of masking, because like I said, I thought this might be a one-layer card. So I have some tape masked around those edges, quick and easy to do. And then I'm grabbing the Sweet Magnolia 6x8 stamps. And I'm going to use the large image and the small image so I can really fill in this design. You could stamp just the large image, you could stamp the small image repeatedly, however you want to do this. But I'm just going to go ahead and stamp both of these at once to save some time and make this a little bit easier. I'll kind of tilt and twist these stamps to make sure that I have the most image that I can in my panel. And once I get them done, I'll pick them up with my stamping platform, and then I'm going to stamp this with Raven Hybrid ink, which is the same ink that I stamped the background with. So it's all going to be just one background color here. Once I'm done, I'm going to add that embossing powder, because like I said, I do like to clear heat emboss. And this is where I abandoned the idea of a one-layer card. So I peeled back my masking tape, and I should have left it in place because as I added my clear embossing powder, I didn't even realize that the masking tape left behind some residue. So I had clear embossing powder outside of the frame, and it's clear, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was shiny, and when you tilt it in the light, you can see that it was shining outside of the design space. So I decided that I would trim this down anyway. It's just a rectangle. It's easy peasy to trim right up against that black line. Let's go ahead and start stenciling and bringing some color into my stamped images. These Sweet Magnolias have coordinating layering stencils, and each stencil, there's 5 stencils in total, 3 for the flowers and then 2 for the greenery pieces. Each stencil has the layer for the large and the small flowers. So my first stencil was the first layer for the large, and then on the right side is the first layer for the small. Same thing with the second layer, or the second stencil. Second layer for the large flower is on the left, second layer for the small flower is on the right. I used the same colors for each flower, but you could mix it up if you wanted to. I used a light pink, which is Soft Kisses, and then I used Fandango for the second layer, and then Boysenberry Blast is the last color I used for the flowers. Now if I was layering these colors one on top of the other, I might not necessarily reach for these colors, but having the Sweet Magnolia stencils is awesome because the colors don't actually layer on top of each other. Each petal is kind of done individually, so I liked the idea of having a vast differentiation of color. It just added to the depth and dimension. I used Key Lime Pie and 4-leaf for the two colors of my greens, layered those up nice and easy, and here is my finished panel. Now again, don't worry that there's ink blending outside of that rectangle puzzle frame. I'm going to cut that down anyway. So I wanted this to look like a stained glass window, and right now it really doesn't have that effect. It just kind of looks like flowers inside of a grid, which is fine, but I wanted to step this up a little bit. So I'm going to grab my clear embossing ink and just take that ink pad directly to my project. I'm not squishing my ink pad around because I don't want the stenciling and the stamping that I've done. I don't want that ink to move. So instead I'm grabbing my ink pad and I'm pushing straight down and lifting straight up, not twisting, straight down, straight up, and then I'm going to tilt my panel to make sure that this panel is completely covered in that clear ink. In my stash, I have a super thick clear embossing powder. I've had this in my stash for so long. It's in a huge container. I've used it a handful of times, but I really like the look that this gives projects because you don't get a fine embossing. It doesn't cover the whole panel. It kind of looks like a beveled embossing, which is how stained glass windows look. So I'm going to use this on my project, but don't feel like you have to go out and buy something special. If you have clear embossing powder, that will work just as well. You could also fill in each of these little squares and rectangles with something like glossy accents, but I prefer to use the embossing powder because I don't like to wait. So I sprinkled on that embossing powder and then hit it with my heat gun, and check this out. You can see how it kind of has that deckled appearance, almost like raindrops on a window, and the texture in real life is so fun. I just love the way this looks. Clear embossing powder on top of inking, stamping or ink blending, anything like that. See how it just makes those colors pop? It brings out the vibrancy of those inks. Now I do have to apologize because my camera corrupted my video feed for the remainder of this project, but that's okay. All I did was stamp a sentiment from that Sweet Magnolia stamp set. I die cut it with coordinating dies, and then I trimmed down that rectangle. I just took it over to my paper trimmer, cut right up against that outer line, and added a thin black mat, popped this on an A2 card, and it's done. All the magic is in the background, so I kept the rest of it quite simple. I really hope you enjoyed this project and that you are inspired to use products together in ways that they may not be intended to be used. Step outside the box and just mix and match. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye!